The cry cut through the wedding hall like glass shattering under sunlight, thin at first and then rising with a desperation so raw that every breath in the room seemed to stop. It came from the small figure standing barefoot on the polished marble floor, her arms trembling as she clutched an infant wrapped in a faded blanket, her eyes wide with fear and resolve as she pointed toward the groom. In that instant, before anyone could move, before the string quartet could recover from the broken note, the millionaire's perfect wedding collapsed into stunned silence. If you are watching on Broken Smill and you believe that even the poorest cry can carry the power to change a destiny, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe for stories of hope, compassion, and second chances. The wedding had been designed to reflect control, success, and triumph. Sunlight poured through tall arched windows, spilling gold across crystal chandeliers and rows of guests dressed in tailored elegance. Everything smelled of fresh flowers and expensive perfume, the kind that promised a future without hardship. The groom, Armen Kave, stood at the center of it all in a dark suit that fit him like armor. He had built his fortune from nothing, or at least that was the story the magazines loved to tell. What they did not print were the years he had spent running from the weight of his past, from the poor neighborhoods where survival came before morality, from the choices he made when fear ruled him more than conscience. Armen's bride, Celine Moreau, was radiant in a simple ivory gown that caught the daylight softly, her calm expression hiding the quiet anxiety she had learned to live with. She was marrying a man admired by the world, but she knew the cost of ambition because she had paid it herself, caring for a sick mother through long hospital days, sacrificing dreams for stability. She believed in building forward, not looking back. The guests believed this wedding was the final chapter of a success story. None of them saw the storm approaching in the form of a trembling child. The girl's name was Iria. She was 9 years old, though hunger and exhaustion made her look younger. Her hair was tangled, her dress too thin for the season, and her shoes had been lost somewhere between the crowded streets and the grand doors of this hall. The baby in her arms was her brother, born into a life that had never known certainty. Iria had learned to be brave too early. When their mother fell ill and disappeared into a system that swallowed the poor without answers, the world left Iria to choose between silence and survival. She had chosen survival, even when it meant walking into a place where she did not belong, guided only by a name she had overheard whispered with shame and regret. As her cry echoed, the guests turned in waves, some with curiosity, others with irritation. A few recoiled at the sight of poverty intruding on polished perfection. Armen felt his chest tighten as recognition struck him with brutal force. He saw not just a child but a mirror of who he had been, and worse, of who he had abandoned. Years ago, when he was still scrambling for opportunity, he had walked away from a woman who asked for trust when he had nothing to give but fear. He told himself he had no choice, that success required sacrifice. He never asked what became of her. Iria's arm remained raised, her finger shaking as she pointed. The baby stirred, unaware of the eyes watching him, unaware of the legacy unfolding around him. The hall felt smaller now, the air thick with unspoken questions. Celine looked from the child to Armen, sensing a truth she had never been told. Her heart pounded, not with jealousy, but with the instinctive ache of someone who had known loss and recognized it in another. Security hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. No one wanted to be the one who dragged a crying child out of a wedding broadcast to the world. The officiant stood frozen, sunlight catching the pages of his book as if time itself had paused. Armen's hands trembled at his sides. He had spent his life controlling narratives, shaping outcomes, but this moment was beyond calculation. It demanded something he had avoided for years, accountability. The story of Iria unfolded without words, written in her hollow cheeks and steady grip on her brother. She had walked for hours after overhearing neighbors speak of a powerful man with her father's name, a man who lived in towers of glass and light. She did not fully understand what a millionaire was. She only knew that the man she was told to find might be the reason her brother would not starve. Fear pressed against her chest, but hope pushed harder. In that hall, Surrounded by wealth she could not imagine, she felt small and terrified, yet more determined than she had ever been. Armin felt the weight of every guest's gaze, but the heaviest weight was the one inside him. He remembered nights spent hungry, swearing that if he ever escaped poverty, he would never look back. He remembered the woman he left behind, the letter he never opened. The success he had built suddenly felt fragile, exposed by the presence of a child who carried his past in her eyes. He saw his younger self in Iria's defiance, and the baby in her arms became a symbol of the future he had refused to acknowledge. Celine took a step forward, her dress whispering against the floor. Compassion rose in her before judgment could. She saw not a threat to her wedding, but a child standing at the edge of despair. Celine had learned long ago that love without empathy was empty. In that moment, she understood that whatever truth this child carried would redefine her life as much as Armin's. The room buzzed with restrained emotion as the truth settled like dust after a collapse. Armin's carefully constructed identity cracked. He felt shame burn through him, followed by an unexpected relief. The secret he had buried had found its way to the light, and with it came a chance to choose differently. The wedding, once a symbol of arrival, transformed into a crossroads. The hours that followed blurred into a quiet unraveling. The ceremony did not continue. Guests whispered and drifted away under the bright afternoon sky, their expectations shattered. The hall emptied of music and applause, leaving behind scattered petals and unanswered questions. Armin sat on the steps outside, sunlight warming his face as he watched Iria rock her brother with a gentleness that belied her age. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of what he had done and what he could still do. Celine sat nearby, her own dreams rearranging themselves in real time. She understood that love was not proven in perfection but in how one faced the unexpected. She had not yet decided what this revelation meant for her future, but she knew that turning away from a child in need was not an option. In that space between heartbreak and possibility, something new began to form, fragile but real. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the courtyard, Armin felt a shift inside him. Wealth had given him comfort, power, and admiration, but it had never given him peace. Looking at Iria, he saw a chance to repair something broken, not with money alone, but with presence and responsibility. The fear that once drove him now gave way to resolve. If this story has begun to touch something deep within you, support it near the end by sharing it with someone who believes that even shattered moments can lead to healing. Before the final moments unfold, take a second to comment and let others know what you felt during this turning point. The future did not become perfect overnight. Healing rarely does. But under the open sky of that interrupted wedding day, a new definition of family quietly took root. The cry that once shattered a celebration became the sound that awakened buried humanity. Armin's wealth would never erase the past, but his choices from that day forward would shape something far greater than a public image. Celine's strength would guide compassion where pride once stood. And Iria, the poor girl who dared to interrupt a millionaire's wedding, would grow up knowing that her courage changed the course of lives far bigger than her own. The world did not end when perfection broke, it began again, softer, truer, and filled with the kind of hope that only emerges when truth is finally seen.